Hey VC, this is Harvey of Spin the Black Circle, and this is May Vinyl Tag 2026. I can't believe we're here again already. Another year almost been and gone, so cheers. And already lots of ahead of 1st of January, lots of VC vinyl tags being posted. I particularly enjoyed those from people new to the VC. There's a chap from Italy who now lives in London named Simone. I'll put a link to his tag in the comments below. But Simone's was excellent. It was very soul and funk infused, so right up my street. I've also particularly enjoyed Katie from Chords Records. Katie is more of a veteran, but her tag is unsurprisingly entertaining and well thought through. But there's lots more. I'm going to get through loads more, as you will, over the next few days and weeks. Please be kind in your comments to everybody. Everyone's just doing this out of a love for music and a love for the hobby. So please, no need for bitterness or keyboard warrior comments from any of us, I don't think, especially at this time of year. So anyway, 20 questions as posed by David Atkinson for this year's tag. The first being your best vinyl purchase of 2025. And I'm going to choose an album that if you'd said to me last year, it would be this. I wouldn't even have heard of this album. So it shows what a rabbit hole this hobby is. But it's the 2010 LP, self-titled and debut and only LP by American band Black Dub. How did I get to this then? So it just shows what a rabbit hole this hobby is, because I really love Emmylou Harris. And this year, one of the Record Store Day releases was Spy Boy, her live LP from the 90s, featuring an amazing backing band in Buddy Miller on guitar, amazing Nashville blues country guitarist. If you haven't heard Buddy Miller, he's sensational. But then the rhythm section was Brady Blade on drums, black funk drummer, and Daryl Johnson on bass. And they sounded so good together, I thought I need to search out whether they recorded as a rhythm section on any other LP. Now they didn't, but close to that was Brady Blade's brother, Brian Blade, a celebrated drummer, with Daryl Johnson, the same bass player, of this 2010 LP, which also features another Emmylou collection, Daniel Lanois on guitar on this and producer, and a vocalist I'd never previously heard of named Trixie Whitley, daughter of Chris Whitley. And what an LP this is. So you can't stream it, unfortunately. You will be able to find some YouTube clips of Black Dub, but it kind of is what it says on the tin. It's black, soul and funk mixed with dub. And the singer, Trixie Whitley, she's got some solo stuff on streaming services. Her voice is this amazing, powerful, white soul female voice. If you mix that with Daniel Lanois' guitar solo, the typical Daniel Lanois production, and this incredibly tight, fantastic rhythm section, this is sensational. So it's quite rare. I think I paid, £80 for this. It's not easy to get hold of. There's probably only a few copies of this that I've seen globally on Discogs. You can get hold of it, but it's gonna cost you. But what an LP. I would say that there's probably 6 or 7 absolutely astonishing funk soul dub tracks on it. The rest is experimental in a good way, but it sounds like they went in the studio with an intention of recording 6 or 7 songs and then extended it with these experimental tracks. But nevertheless, that is my purchase of 2025, the 2010 LP Black Dub by a band of the same name. Sorry that lasted a bit long, but that's an exciting purchase for me. Hunt out some YouTube clips. There's a track named I Believe in You by Black Dub, and if you listen to that, I'm warning you now, you might end up seeking this out and paying a fortune for it. But anyway, Black Dub by Black Dub. Next question, your favourite live musical experience. So again, something I wasn't expecting this year was my friend just a couple of months back actually said, look, there's this band that my son are going to see in Birmingham in the UK, Scottish band named Swim School. And I kind of heard of them. It was one of those things where he said, I'll buy you a ticket. So I went along and they just blew me away. I would say it's kind of Wolf Alice meets PG Harvey meets Cocteau Twins. Bit of shoegaze in there as well. But what an amazing gig. Definitely the gig of the year. It's hard to say whether this band will be, Swim School will be, the next big thing. But getting caught in the emotion of being there, that's what it felt like to me. At this gig, nothing was missing. Amazing female singer, amazing band. The songs were fantastic. So at that gig, they had their debut LP for sale. So I got it signed by the singer, really nice woman, and it's a really good LP. So if you kind of like the sound of if you like Wolf Alice already and you like the Cocteau Twins and a bit of kind of shoegaze, then check these out live. They're doing a global tour at the minute, Swim School. But also check out this this debut self-titled LP by Swim School. So that was my gig of 2025, an unexpected gig. In 10 years, what will my record collection be like? Great question. So I like to think of this as a collection, not a library. So at the minute I've got about 2,200 LPs in here. I kind of don't want it to get much bigger than that. So for the first time ever, for the first time in this round of buying vinyl, from when I sold them in the 90s foolishly, that for the first time in this hopefully final round of having and keeping records, I sold some records earlier this year. Something I never thought I would do when I started recollecting. And that was because I had about 150, 200 albums that were in the loft, stored probably, but I thought, if they're in the loft and I'm not missing them, what's the point? You know, I'd selected them out as things that I wasn't really listening to and put them in the loft. So I think, to answer that question, if I'm still in this house, which I think I hopefully will be in 10 years, it's a nice size house and I've got my own man cave, probably about this size, 200 to 500 is probably the most you can get into this room. And I think I'll just keep shedding things that I'm not listening to, because this, to me, is a collection, not a library. I don't want things that I'm never going to listen to. So anyway, that's where I think I'll be, hopefully in 10 years, goodwill allowing. So if I'm in a new home, what's the one record I'd play and turn up to 11, or the first record? Now this is quite an easy and topical one for me. So I moved into this house 8 years ago, upsized from a smaller house. The kids were getting bigger. And during the move, I needed something musically to anchor to when all my records were in storage. So I promised myself that when I moved in the new home, that the first record I would spin at volume would be The Division Bell by Pink Floyd. Big Pink Floyd fan. And I don't know why I thought of this album as the one I would play. It's not my favourite Floyd album, but I really like it. But I held good on that promise, and when I moved in here, the first thing I did was played Division Bell in my new abode at volume. So I probably would do that again if I moved home, and use that continuity and play Division Bell by Pink Floyd. Next one is show two albums, one by male, one by female. So this one I'd highly recommend, particularly if you're a jazz fan. Well, I'll come back to whether this is jazz or not. It's an album by a British artist named Amanda Whiting, and this is the luminality of her. The word luminality, I think, means between two extremes or between two decisions. But this is jazz harp. She's a harpist. But when I say I'll come back to whether or not this is jazz, it's not that simple. It probably gets failed as jazz, but there's electronic in here, there's breakbeat, there's soul and funk in here as well. But it's a really, really great LP. So the luminality of her, if you can understand that in a Northern English accent, by Amanda Whiting, is the choice of female artist. And the other is an album from the very early 70s by Tommy Flanders, which is named The Moonstone. So this is singer-songwriter fare. This is an LP that I bought and got delivered during lockdown. You know, Tommy Flanders, I think he's still alive, but he was get a Greenwich Village singer-songwriter. He was part of the Blues Project. So you kind of get that very folky singer-songwriter, acoustic fare. Really great songwriting though. This, I'm surprised, is not one of those albums that's kind of floated to the top as a loaded classic. Because if you like, for example, John Baez, or you like Nick Drake's Five Leaves Left, or the more acoustic James Taylor stuff, then you really like Tommy Flanders. So this is The Moonstone by Tommy Flanders. on MGM Records. Is it rare? You don't see it often in bricks and mortars, but you can probably get it online, especially in the US. Maybe more difficult to get hold of in the UK, I think, this now. I've only seen it twice on shelves over the last 10 years. But anyway, I think you can stream it. You can certainly get it on YouTube. The Moonstone by Tommy Flanders. If you like singer-songwriter, acoustic singer-songwriter stuff, that kind of Greenwich Village sound. This is a 1970 LP, I think. His debut and only LP by Tommy Flanders. Now the next one is really hard for me. Top 3 soul or dance. I'm an absolutely manic soul and funk fan. Love it. I was even thinking, do I do a vinyl tag for VC? But I'll check with John from the 6-inch Pianist first in case he's doing one. But especially this year, I've gone crazy for soul and funk. So I've picked 3 albums that I've enjoyed this year at random, really, because there's too much that I've loved. So the first is quite a famous live LP, live in New Orleans by Maze, featuring Frankie Beverly, the one with Changing Times on it. So curious thing about Maze was the studio albums didn't really cut it, but for some reason live they just came on fire. Right? They came alight live, but really great soul and funk LP, double. Maze LP, live in New Orleans, probably the most famous live album. They did a succession of live albums. And I say this is the one that's got that big hit on it, Changing Times. So I think this sold about 1 million in the US. It's a big live album in the US. Quite unusual for soul and funk albums to be, big chart toppers, unless I guess you're talking about some of the James Brown albums. But tremendous stuff. If you haven't heard Maze, it's probably best to start with the live stuff rather than the studio. The next, I've gone crazy for the band Heatwave this year. Bought all of the first 5 Heatwave LPs, and this is probably the most notable, actually. All 5 I've really enjoyed. This is Too Hot to Handle by Heatwave. I guess the interesting thing about Heatwave is in part Rod Temperton, and what a great songwriter he was. He went on to record half of Thriller for Michael Jackson. Write half of Thriller for Michael Jackson. Quincy Jones kept coming back to him as a kind of house songwriter, and also picked up on some of his stuff for George Benson as well. But this debut Heatwave LP is the one with lots of the massive hits on. Title track Too Hot to Handle, Boogie Nights, and then the classic ballad that was covered over and over, Always and Forever. So amazing band and really tight, but the key factor for me is the songwriting of Rod Temperton, and that goes all the way through those 5 Heatwave albums until the end of that first 5 albums, when he stopped actually being part of the band and he was just writing the songs and feeding them into the producer. So anyway, Heatwave, I guess a transatlantic band, mostly American. Rod Temperton was British though, and this is Too Hot to Handle. This is the UK cover of it, which I kind of prefer to the US cover actually. But anyway, there you go. Excellent Heatwave album. I've really gone to Heatwave this year. And it's getting towards disco, I suppose, rather than soul. Now, something much more contemporary is my third soul choice. This is a Portuguese kind of neo-new soul act named Marta Ren and the Groove Velvets. And this is an album named Stop, Look, Listen. So it's kind of in that thing that Coal Mine Records are doing, and a bit like Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings, where it's taking the retro soul sound and updating it. So this is from about, I want to say about 10 years ago, but it's just, as you'd expect from the cover, driving, funky soul with an amazing lead singer in Marta Ren. So Marta Ren in the Groove Velvets, Stop, Look, Listen. It might be, you may have to go to the band's website to get this now. I don't often see this around. I haven't checked on Discogs recently, but if you can, if you're a soul and funk fan, this is a really, really good LP. What do we have next? A track hated from an album that you love. This is difficult to say, but true, I think. Let's just be honest about this, that I really struggled with the opening track on the otherwise amazing Blood on the Tracks by Blonde on Blonde, there's no bad tracks on Blood on the Tracks. Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan, and that is Rainy Day Women numbers 12 and 35. Now what they did in the studio was all swapped instruments and just goofed around for the opening track on one of the most iconic double LPs ever released, and it just doesn't work. It then goes into the amazing proper first track, which is Visions of Johanna, and the rest of the album cooks. So it's a bit like a clown being on stage ahead of a Shakespeare performance. That's how Rainy Day Women numbers 12 and 35. Sacrilege to lots of Bob fans who are watching this, no doubt. I'm a massive Bob Dylan fan. I'm not a completist, but I've got a ton of Bob Dylan albums, and he's a poet and amazing. But I don't understand why he opened one of his iconic LPs with Rainy Day Women number 12 and 35, which is a bit like a clown fooling around. But anyway, here who am I to say? Next question. One album from each of the last 6 decades. So trying to stick away from the obvious. I'm a big Beatles and Stones fan. So instead for the 60s, I've gone with the debut Columbia LP by The Animals. This is an original mono pressing, which I was fortunate enough to pick up for £12. But it's got that fresh 60s British blues invasion sound about it. There's loads of John Lee Hooker and Fats Domino songs on here, and there's a couple of Animals originals too. But it's just a gorgeous, fresh sounding LP, absolutely cooking on mono too, and lovely to look at on that black and blue Columbia label. So yeah, you'll see these in bargain bins. The trick is to find one in decent condition. This is in at least VG or VG plus condition. So I was quite lucky. But yeah, the debut LP by The Animals is from 1960s. 1970s, and a band that I've just started to get into this year. Don't know why it took me so long. Is Octopus by Gentle Giant. So prog album on the Vertigo label. Famed for the leader of this band being Derek Shulman, who later began to be a E&R chap on record labels. I think he had something to do with Bon Jovi. But this is that kind of prog sweet spot that's experimental but still really accessible. The musicianship on this Gentle Giant LP is fantastic. So I need to delve further into Gentle Giant because at the minute I've only got Octopus. It's the only LP by them I've heard all the way through. So that's 1970s. 1980s. Again, we're getting back to the Emmylou Harris connection, because Albert Lee was part of the hot band in the 70s for Emmylou Harris. He's a British guitarist. But this is one of his solo LPs from 1987, I think it was, named Gagged But Not Bound. So as you guess from the title, it's an instrumental LP. But the range of styles on here, from Nashville country to jazz, he even puts his guitar down and plays an amazing piano solo work on this as well. So this is an album for people who just love great musicianship. Yes, there's tunesmithery on here, there was songwriting, but essentially it's about how great the musicianship is on this Albert Lee album. Also got another one by him, the one before this, named Speechless, which was on the same MCA Master Series label. So if you see this around, it's not rare, not that hard to get hold of. I don't think. Gagged But Not Bound by Albert Lee. If you kind of think you like Mark Knopfler's playing and the variety you get from Mark Knopfler, particularly on the solo stuff or some of the Dire Straits stuff, then I think you should check out Albert Lee, because it's not country, it's just some of it's country inflected. So the next is by a band that come in for some ridicule, but I am telling you that the only worthwhile but very worthwhile LP by The Cause is Forgiven Not Forgotten. So if you've dismissed The Cause as largely terrible Irish pop fodder, then the debut album is that exception. It's an absolutely remarkable kind of Irish folk pop LP, songwriting, musicianship, and less sticky and cloying and less candy than their later works. So I'm just try it. If you're screaming, right? If you've dismissed The Cause, I would agree with you from the second album onwards. But Forgiven Not Forgotten from the 90s, I think it was 1995. Is an exception to that rule. And it was only recently re-released on Vine. You can get it easily now. For a time, this was over £100 to buy. Now it's just a typical LP you can buy anywhere. But Forgiven Not Forgotten by The Cause, it's my 90s choice. 2000s, and again, I've got to be honest here, I could have picked something cooler, but the album I've probably played most from that 2000s decade is Continuum by John Mayer. So one of those musicians who's probably hated because he was good looking and also talented, infected with both of those things. But Continuum by John Mayer. This is a double reissue. His songwriting, his guitar work, the arrangements, absolutely fantastic. Undeniably talented. The song "Belief" from this, which is a kind of, it speaks to it speaks right to the heart of people getting behind a religious belief or an idiom or something that means a lot to them, and then be willing to die for it. And it's such a powerful song, "Belief." But anyway, it's a great LP, and it's probably one of his deepest works. He's released a lot of pop for it too. But Continuum by John Mayer from that decade, from the 2000s. And then this LP I can't recommend enough. It's a triple LP from 2016, I think this was released, from Miranda Lambert, The Weight of These Wings. It's a divorce album. She just split from her husband, and she poured every ounce of that bitterness and grief for the relationship and longing and sense of freedom into this triple LP, The Weight of These Wings. And it's without a shadow of a doubt her signature works. There's a lot of great Miranda Lambert LPs, but even if you don't like country, stream at least some of this and see if you like it. So that's the weight of These Wings by Miranda Lambert. It's from the last decade. Would be my choice. If I could spend a day alone with one artist, this is question 9. Who would that be? Then link to question 10. One must ask of that number 9 artist. So I've gone for one of my favorite current bands, Wilco, and the lead singer and band leader of that band, Jeff Tweedy. So I would spend the day with Jeff Tweedy. Maybe invite him to London, seeing he's come all the way to the UK. Because I just think he's a similar age to me. He's in his 50s or he's in his early 60s, and his outlook on life and his lyrics just resonate with me. He's not. The interesting thing about Jeff Tweedy and Wilco is that Jeff Tweedy, rock stars or pop stars who write lyrics will often place the subject matter or what they're trying to relate to you as a listener above your level, right? David Bowie on Ziggy Stardust isn't necessarily talking to some chap from the rough end of Newcastle, where I'm from in the northeast. And so I'm not saying that a lot of that stuff isn't relatable, but few singer-songwriters, it feels like they're sitting next to you and relating directly to who you are. That's just my view. It depends on the music form. But Jeff Tweedy doesn't have any pretense about anything he's writing, and he doesn't grandiose or elevate what he's saying lyrically to something that's above you. So it's a bit like talking to a mate. So that's why I'd spend the day with him. Sorry, I was a bit long-winded. That's why I'd spend the day with him. And my ask of him would just be to have some drinks and tell me, what he's doing next and, where he thinks he's going with his music. And I've just pulled out the deluxe edition of The Whole Love by Wilco. Maybe I'd take this along and we'd thumb through it and end up back here and play some records. So anyway, Jeff Tweedy from Wilco. If you haven't checked out any Wilco, you really should, because he in particular has an amazing talent, amazing band too. I saw them 2 years ago, in Birmingham at the Moseley Folk Festival, and they were really on it live that night in Moseley. So there you go. What is next? A track that brings you to tears. Unquestionably, the final track on D'Angelo's Voodoo, which is named Africa. So we lost D'Angelo this year actually, and he was only in his early 50s. Shocking, very, very tragic and early death. This for me is his signature works, Voodoo, from the year 2000. It's an amazing LP. It ends with the track Africa, which is a observation that African Americans aren't actually at home because they're from Africa. They were brought over as slaves. And it's a kind of a really smart observation of what that means to him, and actually doesn't feel like he's home. He can't go back to Africa because there's nowhere to go back to, but he doesn't feel like he's at home in America, hence this track Africa. But it plays like a lullaby and a really beautiful track too. So if you haven't heard Africa by D'Angelo, it's a gentle, beautiful track. There's not a note of anger in it, but it's an observation about African Americans not feeling like they are truly at home in somewhere that's just an adopted ancestral country for them. So I think that's a really and that kind of hits me. It's a really clever concept, but also it's really heartfelt heartfelt too. Right, on to something more negative. I can't believe that David's asked this, but I'm going to answer it. 3 albums by an artist you've tried to love, but you can't. So the first question is, why would I buy 3 albums by an artist that I just don't get? And by an artist that I've tried to like in the CD era and still didn't get, but I still bought 3 albums on vinyl. And I'm afraid to say, VC, you may not like this, but the 3 LPs are by one Jimi Hendrix. All you've experienced, Access Boulder's Love, Electric Ladyland. What do I not get about Hendrix? I do get him actually, but if music is meant to take you somewhere either emotionally or remind you of something in your life or a particular place or event, he just doesn't do that. It feels mathematical when I listen to him, so I can admire it. The reason I bought these 3 is because I admire Hendrix's work, and I don't want to get rid of these 3 albums. I can listen to them and understand that they are classic rock albums from a pioneering guitarist, and nobody else was doing what he was doing at the time. But it doesn't take me anywhere. Partly his voice grates on me, I think, and partly it just feels quite mathematical. So I would say that from Hendrix, I bought these because I admire them, but I don't love them. They just don't move me. So that's my problem, not Jimi Hendrix. Right? It's not a problem of Jimi Hendrix fans either. I suppose if I'd have seen them, in 1967 in a packed London marquee club, I might feel very differently. But I do have the benefit of hindsight, and I'm afraid, VC, Mr. Hendrix, whilst I admire his work, this does not move me. If I was going to choose one of these 3, I'd probably choose Access Boulder's Love. That's closest to an LP that I really enjoy rather than just admire. But hey ho, in 10 years, I might say these are my 3 favourite LPs, but at the minute, I'm not sure I totally get it. Okay, an artist whose character disappoints. This is not going to be surprising. I thought about Morrissey, but that's too obvious. This is probably quite obvious too. I want to see a Van Morrison. Let's not get into politics. Let's not get into his controversial statements during COVID that he made with Eric Clapton. But let's just acknowledge that he's probably a miserable bastard. And there are too many accounts of him being a miserable bastard for that not to be true. And the other reason I'd say that it's probably true is I've seen him on stage in Newcastle being a miserable bastard. And so that confirmed it. But nevertheless, what an amazing artist. I don't live with him. I don't have to put up with him being a miserable bastard. I can still enjoy his massive pantheon of work. So I thought I'd choose, I've got the typical Van Morrison LPs, but I thought I'd choose Irish Heartbeat, the LP that he did in the late 80s with the Chieftains. I think this is underrepresented, and it's a fantastic Van Morrison co-work with the Chieftains. So there you go, Van the Man, probably unsurprising, but his character probably is a bit disappointing just because he's such a curmudgeon. One album I'd keep if I had to sell all of theirs. Now, I thought about this as more of a, if I didn't have a choice to re-buy any. I think that's the spirit of this, because otherwise the temptation is just to sell your most expensive record and buy loads more, right? So instead of that, what would be the album that I would just want to keep as a keepsake? And I think I would have to say it's Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder. I'm not suggesting this is definitely my favourite LP of all time, but it's bloody well up there. And it's almost like, as the title suggests, your life work thrown into a record. It took him years to record, and he poured over it and kept adding tracks, and he was at the peak of his powers. And it's a remarkable LP by any standard. And this LP, I definitely love rather than just admire. It's beautiful, and it's a work of true genius. From the likes of artists who are more and more difficult to find, right, at the minute anyway. You can't really say that Taylor Swift has released an LP like this. She just hasn't, right? Swiftie fans would disagree, but anyway, Songs in the Key of Life, that would be the one that I would save as a keepsake. If I couldn't just sell an expensive one. VC highlight of 2025. Someone else said this, but I think the recent series by Dylan of Noble Records, where he'd gone to California and he'd met and videoed some serious collectors and record store owners, and showcased their collections for about 20-25 minutes each. that's worth checking out. There's about 4 or 5 episodes of that on his channel. That was great. Just because they were interesting characters, not just because of the music, but also some of the LPs you just wouldn't see anywhere else. Really serious collectors. So that was good. Favorite music bio. Oh man, I can't think of one that I've really enjoyed. I think I struggle with a fictional account. I enjoyed what was the recent Bob Dylan one? No Direction Home, whatever it's called. That was good with Timothy Chalamet. That was good. So instead of that though, I just struggle with that fiction. There's too much of it that'll be missing. Too much of the nuance to be true, even if it's endorsed by the artist. What I did enjoy was I think it's on YouTube, is a 2 or 3 part documentary about the Judds, mother and daughter country band, and this is their LP, River of Time, from the late 80s. And Greggy, that documentary about their lives together, it was like something out of a soap opera because of how hard driving the mother was in driving Winona Judd, who's the real talent of this band. The mother was more of a producer, and how tough she was on her daughter to make it. But they made some incredible music, and for those who like country music or have an affinity for Americana, the Judds were excellent. And Winona Judd's voice is just sensational, one of the greatest voices in country. So if you haven't heard them, then try River of Time by the Judds. It's also got an amazing cover of Water of Love by Dire Straits on here, featuring Mark Knopfler on the actual track. But the Judds documentary, for me, sorry, I couldn't really pick a bio. It's not really my thing. Why does jazz matter? My God, this is a huge question for me. It's up there as one of my favourite types of music. I've got something like 250 to 300 jazz LPs on the right here, separated from the main collection, as I have with soul and funk. That's separate as well. And so this question's too big for me. The only way I can explain it is talk about three eras, why it matters. The first is the bop and bebop era, moving into the first Blue Note LPs. So the Blue Note 1500 series, when that label started off in New York, the 1500 series is renowned for the first time that black African Americans could truly express musically with freedom who they were. So the 1500 series of the initial batch of Blue Note albums is that thing, not yet commercialized, not yet bound by constraints of what the label is, how the band can record. They were just put in the recording studio with Rudy Van Gelder, and they could freely express who they were through their instrument. And so that's what you get. You get the characterization through an instrument in those early Blue Note records of these black African Americans. So jazz matters because the first of 3 phases I'm going to mention, because it's the only music form that was born and bred in the United States, because blues was from Africa, from other countries, and brought in. Folk was brought in from Ireland, but jazz was born in America. And the purest translation of what jazz is and what an African American individual could pour their soul into was those early jazz records. I'm not talking about swing era. I'm not talking about Duke Ellington. I'm not talking about Count Basie. That's great music. But the first time it was truly free was around this. I'm going to say the Blue Note 1500 series, and this is Tad Jones, the magnificent Tad Jones, an American trumpeter, and this is one of those 1500 series LPs. This is a re-release from that recent excellent Blue Note Classic series. But this, my friends, wow, is the first era I'm talking about. The second era is something that was highly influential on rock and other music forms, and that is the electronic phase of jazz fusion. I'm going to cite Bitches Brew by Miles Davis as why jazz matters from that era. Famously, Radiohead said that was massively influential on OK Computer. Bands like Muse have also said they were massively influenced by Bitches Brew. Many other bands definitely had an influence on punk and on artists like Patti Smith too in the CBGB scene. So Bitches Brew by Miles Davis, because that's such an integral part of that electronic jazz fusion scene. and again that freedom element running right through it. So huge universal. That's why jazz matters. The final piece is that it's not a dead music form. So there is a British a thriving jazz music scene at the moment, which is growing and growing. And I think one of the best proponents of that are Ezra Collective. And this is their last LP, Dance No One Is Watching by Ezra Collective. So it's a thriving music form. It still matters. You can't get, when these guys tour Ezra Collective, you can't get tickets because everybody knows how great they are live. But yeah, check out Ezra Collective and the many examples of great recent jazz. I would also say Nubia Garcia and that comment is coming. I've got a video that talks about British jazz, which I did about a year ago. Go back to that if you want to learn more. But that's as brief as I can be about why jazz matters. It's a bigger proposition than rock, and it's difficult to describe in just a couple of minutes, but it does matter. It really does. Last musical request on Death Row. But listen, if I'm on Death Row, I don't want to hear artists. I don't want to hear happy songs or songs that talk about life when I'm Death Row. There's no point in me listening to All You Need Is Love by the Beatles when I'm about to die. So I thought, what would take me through to the other side with the right frame of mind? And I think it's probably Ready to Die by the Notorious B.I.G. because he's emphasising. It starts with him being born this LP, it ends with him getting shot and killed on what's kind of quasi-concept album, and all the way through the LP, he's contemplating his own mortality. So I thought, I'm on Death Row, let's play something that's apt and doesn't remind me of the life that I'm no longer going to have. So Ready to Die by Notorious B.I.G. By the way, one of the greatest hip-hop LPs ever made, and there's a reasonable consensus around that too. Sell your favourite artist to a new listener. The Rolling Stones are my favourite band ever, and that's starting to increase actually. The older I get, the more I've come to the realisation that the Stones are where it's at for me. I think what sells it is that nobody did better than the Stones, pairing the greatest frontman with one of the greatest guitarists and songwriters there ever was, with an absolutely killer drummer in Charlie Watts, and the ability to write some of the most iconic songs and albums that were ever recorded. Sticky Fingers from 1971. I'm going to convince you because over 60 years they have continuously proved that they are the greatest, including their last LP, Hackney Diamonds, which confounded even me in being an absolutely amazing LP. But start with Sticky Fingers, and just the frontman, the songwriting, the guitarist, the drummer in particular, and the way they coalesce as a band and come together as a band. Nobody did it better in their day, and even through to now, than the Rolling Stones in my view. Okay, we're almost there now. In fact, we are there. If you VC meet up in 2026, who are the three people you would invite? The first two are people who've been kind to me when they had no need to be. My channel isn't a big one, so Steve Carlson, I love his channel, but he even when I've only got 50 to 60 viewers, he'll say hello Harvey, good to see you back, and he'll watch the video and comment and relate to something I've said, and I'm sure he has to do that across multiple channels, and just somebody who gives back. And similarly, Rob Walker, who's done that a few times. You know, he must go around lots of channels and really watch them, and not just watch the first couple of minutes because he's commenting halfway through on something that I've showed. So Rob's been great. And the last would be Steve Westman, just because I love that audiophile roundtable and his style. He's a similar age to me, so it'll be good having that with him. If I ever met him, I'm sure I won't because he lives in Canada. So more likely to meet Rob Walker. Hopefully I will soon. Unlikely to meet Steve Carlson and Steve Westman, but there you go. That's for me. That's slightly longer than I thought. I was hoping to keep this at 20 minutes. We're almost at 40. Hopefully you haven't fallen asleep, but that was enjoyable. I'm not going to enjoy putting all those records back, but that's the name of the game on the VC vinyl tag. With that, wish everybody a happy new year. Look forward to seeing your VC vinyl tag uploads, and peace. Bye.